you want to designate an offering to Camp Galilee, go ahead and write that on your envelope or check or whatever, and we will continue to collect our offering by dropping it in the basket on the way out the door. So we will also soon begin starting to collect offerings for Christmas for Christ. I really like this offering. Amos, do you have something to say? Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there. I know, Sunday school is so fun, and it's probably not nearly as much fun when we do church not together. So we're going to start collecting soon for Christmas for Christ. And this is a really special offering to me and to us because the funds that we give to that have come back to bless us tremendously. We've received a lot of money from other churches giving to Christmas for Christ so that we can have a beautiful sanctuary space, so that it helps pay some of our bills. So I really have a big heart for this offering because it helps plant churches in other communities where there is not a light of truth. And we know that there's a lot of deception and a lot of darkness in our world, and more than ever, we need a light of truth. And this offering was started by a man who just saw all the hustle and bustle and crazy that happens around Christmas and thought, but it's about Jesus, and how do we give back to him? And this is a big way that we can give back to him because we can bring the gospel to other communities. And so I'm really proud of you guys because in all of the past years that we've been a church, you've given tremendously to this particular offering. And I think that that shows that you have a passion to reach out to your world, and not just to reach out to Princeton, but to reach out to other communities that don't have churches. So we will start collecting for that soon. So be thinking about that. I know a kind of a good rule of thumb. There's a couple of different ways. A lot of times there are little envelopes that we put up with different offering amounts, and you can choose one of those. Another way that a lot of people do it is they think, well, how much would I spend on a gift for one of my family members? And I think it's a good rule of thumb that if you're going to spend on your family, you ought to spend at least as much on Jesus. It's like when people tell me, oh, it's too early for Christmas music. I'm like, excuse me? If you're talking about your birthday month, I think we can spend at least a couple on Jesus. So, whatever, Patty. So, think about what you want to give to Jesus for Christmas. All right. Guess what, Amos? Now is time for Sunday school. This is the only time kids get to run in church. You can run out the door to Sunday school. Okay. All right. As our youngest church members make their way to their Sunday school class, we can pull out our Bibles and open to Isaiah chapter 40. So interestingly enough, it's not that I didn't know I was long-winded, but when you see how long the recordings are online, you're like, I need to preach shorter. So hopefully I won't be super long today. How do you like that? I just want to talk a little bit, as I usually do, about just what God's talking to me about. So we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 40. We're going to start in verse 21 and read all the way to the end of the chapter. I'm reading out of the good old KJV, so if you have another version, just follow along. And starting in chapter 40, verse 21, have ye not known? Have ye not heard? Hath it not been told you from the beginning? Have ye not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in, that bringeth the princes to nothing. He maketh the judges of the earth as vanity. Yea, they shall not be planted. Yea, they shall not be sown. Yea, their stock shall not take root in the earth, and he shall also blow upon them, and they shall wither. And the whirlwind shall take them away as stubble. To whom then will ye liken me, or shall I be equal, saith the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number? He calleth them all by names, by the greatness of his might. for that he is strong in power, not one faileth. Why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel? My way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God. Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary? There is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So I'll just kind of dig through this scripture a little bit, but it just really stuck out to me because I find in my personal human existence that it is quite human for us to look around at the disastrous state of the world around us and to say this. That's Greek for I'm kidding. Okay. Also to say this. God, where are you? What are you doing? Don't you see what's happening here? Have you forgotten about us? How can you let this happen? Don't you care? Don't you care about justice, about truth? Right? It's kind of easy to think that way, right? And then what happens, at least to me, is then you kind of begin to feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, and that responsibility has fallen to you because obviously God walked off and left us, so somebody's got to do something, right? And so then all of a sudden it feels like the salvation of the world has been left up to me. Something must be done, we bluster. And so we set out to do something for the Lord, like he needs our help to sort it out. Or we look around us and we feel dread and despair. And it just creeps in, and all of a sudden we're thinking, what will I do if things don't turn out the way I hope they would? It just doesn't look good. What if the candidate I voted for isn't inaugurated? What if laws get passed and this happens or that happens? What if the church gets closed again? What if there's stringent guidelines and they keep me from working? How am I going to pay my bills? What if the economy goes bust? What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of myself and my family and my kids and, all the different questions that everyone has? Because I don't have kids, so that's me talking for you who do. Our sleep is restless, our stomach is in knots, our tempers are short, our eyes are weary from crying, and our chests are weary with sighing. We bemoan our losses, crying, God, where are you? Don't you care that my finances are in jeopardy? That my place of worship might close? That the presidency is at stake? That I might lose everything, including my rights? It feels like we've been abandoned. And then what happens? We feel like that security of our own lives, that's been left up to us. It's up to me to find my own security and my own safety and my own safe little haven. It's up to me to build my bunker, Actually, ironically, Keith and I, on our way down to Heartwork and Man Up, we passed truck after truck after truck with these concrete building compartments. I'm like, somebody doesn't think that this election is going to turn out. They were totally building a concrete bunker somewhere. It was weird. But people do that. Why do they do it? Because they think the world's going to end and I must protect myself. I have to defend myself. I have to protect myself. And I'm not saying that we don't stand for truth or we don't, try to do what we can to defend liberties and all that stuff. But in the end, do you know what? You could be living in your concrete bunker and die in there. And it's not up to you. Your life is not in your own hands. And we forget that. We think, oh, something has to be done. I have to do something. And so we set out to create our own security. The world is somehow no longer the whole world in his hands, which my niece Eowyn likes to sing, he's got the whole world in his hands, and I like to sing, he's got the whole hot mess in his hands, because I think it's more accurate. But it's like we think somehow God has slipped and dropped the whole world from his hands, and now it's up to me. I got to pick up the pieces because I don't know where God is in this, right? So in our opening text, God, through the prophet Isaiah, asks some really pertinent questions that resonate today in our world and in our lives, in my life, in my heart right now. And those questions are, don't you know? Haven't you heard? Has nobody told you? Okay, do we know what? Have we heard what? Have we been told what? God. Don't you know? Don't I know what? Don't you know God? Haven't you heard? Heard about what? God. Has nobody told you? Told me what? God. Don't you know God? Haven't you heard of God? Has no one told you of God? Really, in the face of any pandemic, any presidency, any plight, any overwhelming and indescribable situation, there's an overwhelming and indescribable reality of God that should be and truly is more than enough as a response to any of those situations. When I see people like, oh, there's this many cases and so many deaths, don't you know? Know what? God. Biden or Trump, and he's trying to do this and he's doing that, and I just don't know who's gonna. Yeah, haven't you heard? Heard what? I mean, I've been watching the news. No. Haven't you heard? God. God. He's the ultimate trump card in any game. No pun intended. We're not talking politics today. Trump card means the card that always, gets the hand. Okay. He's the one up to anything. You know, the person who, no matter, it's like, oh, well, I did this. Oh, well, I did this. Like, no matter what your issue is, oh, yeah, this is my bad day story, and this happened, my house burned down, and whatever. I'm not saying that's not a problem. But God is the one-up response to whatever you bring to him. Please, dear God, I'm not asking for anybody's house to burn down. I'm just trying to bring an analogy that no matter what it is that we bring, he is the one-up to anything the world can throw at you. He's a guarantee. He's a sure thing. He's undefeated, easy win, no-brainer, blowout victory, clear champion. Done. There's, no matter what our complaint, our fear, our disappointment, our shame, our crisis, when the enemy whispers, you're lost now. Where'd he go now? You just go, don't you know? God. When you hear, oh, there's just no hope left. Wait, haven't you heard? God. When the enemy shouts at you and tries to intimidate you, it's like, stop, please. Haven't you been told? God. God is the response. God is the answer. God is enough. And I get to say this for me because I need that reminder all the time. It's super easy to just be like, why am I feeling kind of stressed out? And it's like, oh, because the building lady dropped off the newspaper and the front headlines are always, stressful. And it's like, oh, well, this stuff doesn't matter when God, right? And I need that reminder, and we need that reminder, and our world needs that reminder. It's he that sits above it all, and in comparison to everyone else is an ant. An ant. Nothing in comparison to God. And that's what we read here. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Hath it not been told you from the beginning? And have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers. They even crunch when you step on them. Worse than ants. That stretches out the heavens as a curtain and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. It is God that rules above the heavens and above the princes, the rulers, the judges, the presidents, the cabinets, the ministers, the senators, the governors. All of them are nothing. He's the one that sets them up. He's the one that takes them down. He moves them aside. He secures them in place. He's the one above it all. He determines who is planted, who takes root, who withers, who is blown away. That's what it says. It says that in verse 23 and 24, that bringeth the princes to nothing. He maketh the judges of the earth as vanity. Vanity is typically, I didn't look it up in this case, but like throughout Ecclesiastes, it's like more or less spitting into the wind. Like it's just like nothing. It's just like gets blown away. It's nothing. And it says, yea, they shall not be planted. Yea, they shall not be sown. Yea, their stock shall not take root in the earth. And he also shall blow upon them, and they shall wither. And the whirlwind shall take them away as stubble, like a little dust storm, a little tumbleweed. That's what all the powers that be in our world are in comparison to God. It doesn't mean that he hasn't set up authority over us and we need to, respect the authority that's in place. Paul said, well, Emperor Nero, who we would all think is the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst, while he was ruling, he said, pray for your authorities. So if he was praying for Emperor Nero, then it doesn't matter who's in office, we can pray for them. I don't think we have an Emperor Nero quite yet. So in fact, when Isaiah is trying to describe God, when considering God, when we consider God, our minds can't even get it right. He's just too big and too undefinable for that. We have no one to compare him to, nothing with which to liken him. So a lot of times when you're trying to describe something to someone who's never seen it or encountered it before, you're like, well, it's kind of like this, and it's that color, and this shape is about that size. We don't have those parameters to put around God. Our heads just can't get there. We don't have something to be like, well, he's kind of like this. No, we don't have a thing or a person or a power to compare God with. So with whom do you compare the one who has created the universe and every night calls out each star by name, sets it in place, and keeps it from falling? He doesn't ever miss one. He doesn't forget to light one. Or just be like, I'm 3/4 of the way through and, I'm calling it a night. I'm just too tired. He never runs out of the energy to keep them alight. There's never been an astronomist who one night goes to the observatory and is like, guys, Betelgeuse is gone. Like he was just there. I don't know what's going on. Like every one of them is there. Every one of them is lit. He's got this. So how could we ever possibly think that he's forgotten us? Why, when we know all of this and have heard all of this, would we say, like the people Israel and Jacob that are identified in the Bible, it says, why sayest thou, O Jacob, and speakest, O Israel? My way is hid from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from God. Why would we say, he can't see me? My way is hid from him. This steep climb I'm on where I'm struggling and toiling, he can't see me any longer. I'm hidden from him. I've gotten too far out of his sight, or there's something else that's too big that's overshadowing me. My mountain is too high. Why would we think that? Or he's forgotten all about me, or my case is beyond his skill. It's just too bad. It's just too late. My judgment is passed over from my God, which means like he's overlooked justice in my life. Don't you know? Haven't you heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, which is that covenant maker and covenant keeper, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, which means Jehovah or Yahweh or however you want to say it, the creator of all you see and everything you've experienced. He doesn't ever grow tired or get weary. He didn't go to bed at the beginning of 2020 and just napping it away, and that's why things are a mess. His understanding and knowledge are deeper than we can imagine. If we could swim in it, we'd never find the bottom. There's nothing that's happened that he's like, oh, now what? Oh, this virus, I just don't know what to do about this. Oh, they're counting votes. How's that going to turn out? Do you think he didn't know? He gives power to those who are weary and strength to those who are weak. Who feels weary sometimes? Who feels weak? I know probably more than ever over the last year, I felt kind of powerless as I see this and that happen, or this restriction or that call gets made. And I'm just like, sometimes I just feel like I don't have a voice. But we're promised that when we're weak and when we're weary, that God gives us strength and power. But those who rely on themselves, who insist on doing it their own way and by their own strength, will fall flat on their faces. Even youthful vigor and those in the prime of life don't have what it takes to endure. It doesn't matter how young you are and how smart you are and how fancy you are, you're not going to make it on your own. But that isn't what it's about. It's not about making it on your own or being strong enough or cool enough or smart enough, because it's not about you. It's not about me. It isn't about my grand plans to save the world. If I want to endure and if I want to win, if I want to soar above it all, there is only one thing I have to do, and the Bible says it's wait. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. My strength needs to be renewed. So I guess what I have to do is wait. And in the Amplified Bible, it always, before that, when it says to wait on the Lord, it explains what that means. It says, expect him, look for him, hope in him. But you don't, as the epistles say, you don't hope for something that you already have. So that means if you're hoping for something, it's not here yet. We have to wait for him. Don't be in a hurry to do your thing, to do a work for the Lord. It's not that we shouldn't be serving him, but sometimes he hasn't even given us directions. And we're out there like, I'm going to do a thing for God. And it's like, no. None of us can do a thing for God unless God's in it. And we have to wait for him. Whenever someone got ahead of God in the Bible, the results were, well, less than glorious. Abraham and Sarah didn't wait for God. The result was Ishmael and a family dispute that still impacts the world today. Big problem. Big mess up. Moses got ahead of God and ended up having to flee Egypt for his life and spends 40 years in obscurity herding sheep in the desert. Saul got ahead of God and forfeited the kingdom because he refused to wait until Samuel showed up and did something that was outside the bounds of his role. The Bible doesn't tell us to wait for God because God's fallen behind and has to catch up. It says to wait for him because we as humans are just so often really impatient and we're impulsive. And we know that God has promised us things and we want to make them happen. But sorry, we're not that smart and we get it wrong when we do it on our own. Thankfully, God used all of those situations. He used Abraham's mess up and Sarah's mess up. He used Moses' mess up. He used Saul's mess up to he always takes our mess ups and uses them for good. But I promise it would just be better if we stuck next to God and let him give us the directions and did things on his timeline. The Bible doesn't tell us to wait because God needs to catch up and we're just that much faster and smarter than him. It's just, if you get ahead of God, you can't possibly know where he's trying to lead you. He can't lead you when you're out there in front of him. And what happens is you might wander off in the wrong direction because he's behind you and you're ahead of him. If we are waiting for God, patiently staying right beside him until he's ready to move, we won't ever end up in harm's way and we won't ever get off track. If we refuse to move on without him, if we steadfastly stand and watch for him, expecting him, hoping in him, we won't be disappointed, nor will we be weary, because God's pace is never too fast. One thing you never see Jesus doing in Scripture is running. He was never in a hurry. I don't know. Somebody said that to me once, and I was like, yeah, he's never in a hurry. And it's because he never felt pressured to do anything outside of what God told him to do. And God never puts anything on you that doesn't fit right or that's, too much or whatever. He He knows exactly what he wants you to do. And I know that I have realignment to do in my life because often I'm feeling in a hurry, rushed, worn out. Well, you know what? That's an indicator that I'm not living my life within the bounds of what God has for me. I'm not trusting him in some area because I'm obviously relying on myself, and that's where my life gets rushed. It gets overtaxed, overwhelmed, because God's not in a hurry. We're in a hurry because we're on a timeline. We think, I got this much time to get this done. God doesn't live in time. He's got as much time as he wants. But he wants to use you, and he'll use you in the place and the time that he's put you. We have to be available to him, and we're not available to him when we're rushing around doing our own works for God. So this isn't a sermon about discouraging people from doing good things. I think it's more about sitting still and listening until we know which things are God's things. Because we all have really good intentions and want to do good things, but sometimes we can end up expending our energy and our focus on good things that we think we should be doing versus the better things that God has for us. But then we end up stretched too thin or missing something because God's not in a hurry, and we shouldn't be either. We become weary because we're running around using our human wisdom and human strength to try and do the work of the Spirit. And consequently, we fail, or we do things poorly, or we're working in the wrong field or at the wrong season, and we wear ourselves out. You're going to wear yourself out trying to harvest a field that's not ripe. You're going to wear yourself out tilling crops under the soil if you think it's time to plow the field and it's harvest time. And we can be genuinely trying to do our best, but if we're not spending the time to wait and hear from God, we're probably going to end up doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. But if we are waiting, resting, watching for God, and following his lead, we won't be worn out. We'll be strengthened. Our faith will grow. Our relationship with God will grow. Our hope will grow. Our capacity to love and to reflect his image will grow. Because if you do what God tells you to do, the results are guaranteed. We don't always see them. Like, we think, oh, well, God told me to do this and I did this and I don't really see much for it. But that's because we don't always see the end. But the results are guaranteed when you do what God tells you to do. And so then your faith is strengthened because it's like, oh, I trusted God and I stepped out and I did this. I did this thing, and then what he said he would do happened. So then we begin to believe more in God. But when we're stepping out and doing things because, like, well, I don't know, I think it's the right thing to do. I don't know, and we haven't spent the time to wait and listen for God's direction. If it's not what God wanted us to do, then it's like, well, I prayed for this situation and God didn't come through. Well, maybe he did his will, but you were praying for something different. And so now you think God doesn't do what he said he would do. No, God promised that he would do what we asked in accordance with his will, not what we asked in accordance with our will. And we have to take the time. And when we do, then our faith grows because we see God does do what he promises when we're working with him, because it has to be his power. I can't heal people. I don't know if you knew that. I just can't. And I can't bring financial miracles to people's lives. I can't save anybody. I'm really bad at saving, healing, and providing miracles because I am a human, and it requires God. And if I want to see those things, it's never going to be me that saves, heals, or, resurrects someone or any of those things. It's always going to be God. So if I want to see those things, I have to be in step with him, not like out here doing what I think is his will before I'm sure. And waiting on the Lord typically means spending more time with him. And the more time we spend with him, the more we grow to become like him. And so we start to grow in our faith and our love and our capacity to be like Christ. So notice the imagery of the promise to those who wait. It says, those who wait will rise up with wings as eagles. Have you ever seen an eagle flying? You know what you very rarely see? Just every once in a while, here and there, they flap their wings. Eagles aren't like that's what chickens do, and they don't get very far. Eagles, they just hold their wings out and they soar. Soaring doesn't involve a lot of work from the eagle. He just has to position himself over an updraft of the wind. They stick their wings out there and they catch the wind. And another word for wind is spirit. And it lifts them upward. They don't do a bunch of work. They're not out there like, gotta get there. No, they just find where the spirit is and let it lift them up. And if we're willing to allow God to do the work, it's the wind that does the work when you see those eagles soaring. It's not the eagle. The eagle has to get himself aligned with the wind. And when the eagle is aligned with the wind does the work. If we're willing to allow God to do the work, we will spend a lot less time flapping about like noisy chickens, but we'll go a lot farther. And we'll go a lot higher. And we'll be sustained and lifted by the strength and the power, and we won't be wearied. Eagles don't get worn out by soaring because they're not out there, you know. They also don't tend to get their heads chopped off and get roasted for dinner. So these are things to think about. The eagle doesn't do the work. The wind does the work. The eagle has a lot of responsibility in finding where that wind is. So it's not that we don't have any part. We have to find the spirit. We have to stick our wings out. We have to follow the spirit. Because if he gets off the updraft, you know where the eagle's going? Down. So we have our responsibility. This is not about like, okay, time. I titled this, it's time to wait. That doesn't mean it's time to sit on your hiney and scroll through your phone. It just means it's not time to go out there and do your own thing, trying to do God's will. It's time to find where God is and let him do his work. But a lot of times, he's a lot slower than you and I would be. So I'm wrapping it up. Said I was going to preach shorter. Whatever it is that may be against you right now, or whatever it is that you see that it's like, I think we all see this world needs God. And honestly, I know so many times just in my wish for people to have God, I've probably gotten ahead of his timeline and ruined a good crop. I don't like saying that. Because I just really wanted this person to have Jesus. But if the fruit isn't ripe, it ain't time to pick it. And this is not an excuse to sit around and be like, well, I guess it's not harvest time. Well, maybe it is. And maybe you're just not at the right fruit. And God has a different fruit for you. There have been people in our lives. Keith and I were just talking with my parents yesterday. They were like, oh, is that couple you're teaching a Bible study to? Nope. That couple shut the Bible study down. But instead of continuing to be like, hey guys, when you want to schedule Bible study, when they obviously don't, we've just decided that there's got to be, if this isn't ripe, there's got to be someone else who is. And God, who should I be talking to today? And maybe the stage of that field is friendship stage. It's not Bible study stage yet. It's hanging out and showing people the love of God stage. And that is okay. I think we can get so driven by our own desire to, it's really pride. Like, I mean, honestly, as a pastor, it's like, oh, I got to show people I'm growing a church here. I'm not growing anything. God's growing something. And this is the group of people he has here. And it's not that he doesn't have more for us, but I'm not going to freak out because I haven't tripled our numbers or something. It's not mine. It's his. And if we're doing what he wants, he's been doing a lot of growth in the people in this building, and that is growth just as much as having more people sit on the pews. It's not an excuse for us to ignore the harvest. It's not an excuse for us to sit around, but it's just the truth that sometimes we feel pressured by human standards to do things that are outside the will of God. And that's the truth. So take a good look at what you're facing today, who you're wanting to reach, what's going on in your world, and then ask yourself, do you know? Have you heard? There's nothing to worry about here. There's no need to rush around saving the world. I'd love for you guys to baptize Duncan this weekend, but you know what? Please don't hold him down in your tub unless he's like, can you guys baptize me? God's got this. You know what? Like, we don't need to be rushing ahead of him in anything because he's got a timeline. And whether you're feeling like, oh God, I'm so stressed out, my family's lost and I really want them to find you. Or, God, I'm so afraid of what's happening in our world and I just don't know what's going to happen with this or with that. You just got to say, it's like the psalmist says, soul, what's going on? Soul, don't you know? Haven't you heard? Haven't you been told from the beginning? The everlasting God is ruling over all of this. There's no need for me to rush around getting ahead of God. I can't anyways. The only thing to do is to wait. Wait for God. Let him take the next step, and then you step up right next to him. So that's where it comes in. When he takes the step, you can't get behind either. Don't get out there ahead of him, but you wait for God, and he'll take a step, and then you step right with him. Stop flapping around. The only thing to do is to find where the Spirit is, stick your wings out, and to let him go to work. And he'll take you to the right places at the right time on his Spirit. And you won't be worn out, and you won't be stressed out, and you won't be afraid because God, you're not hanging up there in the sky on your own. It's his Spirit. We're not wandering around this earth on our own. It's his Spirit. Let him take the steps. Let his Spirit lift us to new heights, new places that we can't reach on our own or by our own strength. There's so much in our world that we can't control. But haven't you heard? God. And we're going to get really worn out trying to fix a broken world with human strength. And the only way for us to not grow weary in the world we live in is to not get ahead of God, to stay right with him, because he'll get us to our destination. So, who is it you feel you got to save? Maybe it's yourself some days. Who is it that you're trying to reach? What is it that's keeping you from sleeping at night? What is it that scares the mess out of you when you read the newspaper? Don't read it. It's bad anyways. Stop right now and just ask yourself, do you know? Do you know that you know? Do you know in your heart God? Do you know him? Is he big enough in your life to manage that? That news headline, that number in your bank account, that friend who keeps pushing back when you talk about God. Let's just spend a little time in prayer. Can kick those songs on so that we have a little time for prayer here. It's time for us just to ask ourselves, in the face of whatever it is that wants you to hurry, hang on. Have you heard? God. God. It's going to be okay. God. I got to just find that updraft. I just got to find that wind. I don't have to flap around. I don't have to save the world. I just got to find God. I just got to wait for God. He'll strengthen me. Let's pray.
The world can wait. I need to stay a little longer in your presence. Yeah. The world can wait. I need to stay a little longer in your presence.